Intermittent fasting has become a very popular fat loss method. However, if you're over 40, there's some risks you might want to be aware of. I'm going to explain those risks and give you an alternative to help you keep losing the weight without the downsides. Now, if your goal is autophagy, I'm going to give you an alternative to that as well. But intermittent fasting, of course, when you condense your eating window into a 8 or possibly a 6-hour window throughout the day, followed by a 16 or 18-hour fast. Now, I was a big proponent of intermittent fasting for at least a decade, practicing it myself, as well as fasted workouts, recommending it to clients, recommending it to everybody online, with the only warning being if you're over 60, you have a possible increased risk of sarcopenia or loss of muscle. Now I'm backing that up to 40. If you're over 40, increased risk of loss of muscle, loss of lean mass. And if you're female, I don't recommend it at all. And again, I will explain why. But it begins with the need for our body to use glucose to regulate our blood sugar. So whether you realize it or not, you're always burning some percentage of fat and glucose. And there's some tissues in your body that only burn glucose. So we always need some level of glucose in our body. So after about 8 hours of fasting, our bodies start to say, hey, our glycogen levels are getting low. Your liver is responsible for regulating your blood sugar. And it will use its stored glycogen in the liver to do that. So when blood sugar levels start getting a little low, it will break down glycogen and release it into the bloodstream. After about 8 hours of fasting, glycogen levels in liver get down to right around 20% or so, depending on where you started, but they get down right around 20%. And that's when the liver's saying, hey, we don't want to get much lower. Let's start making some more glucose. And it will signal a process called gluconeogenesis, which means it elevates cortisol, epinephrine, and glucagon, the stress hormones. They're also catabolic hormones, which means they break down tissue. And so these stress hormones will break down protein or amino acids from your muscle, skin, and bone and take that tissue, those amino acids, to your liver and to some level your kidney, where it is turned into glucose to help refuel that glycogen in the liver, which is then used to keep your blood sugar levels stable. Okay, and that's fine now and then. It's a great backup mechanism. It's a great survival mechanism. And that cortisol can be great for some energy, especially if we were, let's say we were in the wild, we were hungry, we couldn't find food, and we need a little extra nervous energy, cortisol, to help us have the energy to go to find some food. But if you're doing this day after day, you're going to lose some lean mass because, again, it's breaking, every time it does this, it's breaking down lean mass from, again, muscle, skin, and bone. Now, so if we're over 40, muscle, skin, and bone are pretty important, aren't they? We're thinking about longevity. We're thinking about how we're going to stay young and strong. We don't want to break down muscle. Muscle is expensive. It's hard to build. We want dense bones. And we don't want to break down the collagen in our skin because that's what keeps us looking young. So if we can avoid doing that on a regular basis, breaking down lean mass, but still lose weight, that sounds like a better alternative to me. So this process, again, elevates cortisol. And one other downstream effect of cortisol is it can elevate what's called SHBG, or sex hormone binding globulin. When sex hormone binding globulin does just what it says, it binds to sex hormones, or specifically testosterone. So this elevated SHBG will bind itself to the free testosterone in your system, let's say, and will keep it from being utilized by your tissues. So elevated SHBG means you have less free testosterone available for you to use. Doesn't sound like a good idea, does it? I experienced this myself. This is something I went through after, again, a decade of intermittent fasting and fasted workouts, very high intensity fasted workouts. My SHBG was very elevated, but I didn't really think too much about it until I basically hit a wall. I looked good, but I didn't feel good. My cortisol levels were elevated, which means my SHBG was elevated. Testosterone was low. I wasn't sleeping well. I was not recovering well from my workouts. I wasn't getting stronger, but I also was feeling burning all the time, just walking around. Felt a little burn in the muscle. Again, this with the sleep being disturbed, burning in the muscles, little fatigue all the time, those were the clue. It's like overtraining, but it wasn't that I was overtraining as much as I was under fueling. So this is a risk with intermittent fasting, especially if you're working out a lot. But again, if your goal is to lose weight, there's a better way to do that without risking breaking down more lean mass on a daily basis. I understand intermittent fasting is great for cutting the appetite. Some of the risks that can come from breaking that fast are when you do start eating and you open the gates, you start grabbing everything within reach. So the hunger for many people can get a little bit out of control, and then you start reaching for things and eating things you really didn't intend to eat. So we lose a little bit of that self-control or good decision making when it comes time to eat if we're new to intermittent fasting, or maybe we just have some metabolic issues on board. Let's face it, when insulin is elevated because of metabolic disease, or you're not used to cutting calories or cutting out certain foods that you maybe had a real strong affinity for, let's just say that, when it does time to eat, if those foods are in reach, you might be very quick to reach for them. So with the combination of elevated cortisol, breaking down of lean mass, sometimes the intensity of hunger that can come after intermittent fasting, and the impact it can have on hormones, I think there's a better way. Now, while we're talking about hormones, I want to address the issue with women as well. Like I said, I don't recommend it for women at all. Women, your different sex hormone combination going on there. You have progesterone and estrogen, which are fluctuating throughout the month for the primary purpose of allowing for a pregnancy and then supporting a child if that pregnancy is successful. So while those are fluctuating throughout the month, when cortisol is elevated, that can have a real negative impact on those hormones. For some women, it can disrupt their cycle. Others may not notice it in their cycle, but it can have a negative impact on their thyroid, which means that their body starts pulling back and notices a stress level of, hey, we're not getting fed. It's a little more sensitive. Women are a little more sensitive to this because of those hormonal fluctuations of estrogen and progesterone and the overall purpose of supporting another life. So when there is a deficit in energy, not just in calories, but with a regular fasting and those elevated cortisol levels, which are definitely a stress hormone, the rebound effect is for many women to actually store more fat when they do eat. So yes, you're going to burn fat during the fasted period, but you're elevating cortisol to a greater level. You're creating more distress with thyroid function and with the sex hormones. And so then when you begin eating, the response is, hey, we got a survival issue here. We've got an issue with not having enough fuel on board to support the whole baby making process. So when we do eat, we're going to store some more fat so we have some more energy left over. So for some women, it affects their cycle. It could lower their thyroid, which means they're going to burn fewer calories throughout the day, which is going to lead to more fat storage. So not a good idea. And the same is true with fasted workouts. I would say, ladies, unless you're doing like a light little bit of cardio first thing before you do any kind of intense cardio or intense strength training, have something. Eat some small amount to let your body know you're not starving. There's not going to be a huge energy deficit. Give yourself some protein, some BCAAs, maybe a little bit of carb possibly on board, 15, 20 grams of carb before you start a workout. But definitely for over 40, I would recommend the same thing. I'm not a big fan of fasted workouts for people over 40 for those same reasons of wanting to preserve lean mass and the impact of cortisol has on our body's thyroid function and ability to, well, let's face it, it's a little harder to build muscle over 40, isn't it? We don't assimilate protein as well, or hormones like testosterone and growth hormone are starting to decrease. And so we just don't have the rebound that we once had from stress like we had in our 20s and 30s. So being over 40, let's be a little more aware of that, a little more mindful in the methods we take to lose weight. Muscle is precious. Bone density is important. And as mentioned before, collagen in our skin, vital for keeping us young looking. What's the alternative? I recommend eating protein first thing in the morning. So within a couple hours of getting up, definitely after the sun is up, take on some protein on board. If you have something else with that protein, great. I recommend whole food. So animal-based protein and whole food carb with that is my general recommendation for most people. But eating a breakfast with at least 30 grams of protein in that breakfast will set you up to have the protein on board. So if you are, say from that point, you're not eating for another 4 or 5 hours, or you're following a very low carb or ketogenic diet, at least you have the protein that you've consumed for your body to use. If it needs more glucose, it can break down that protein you've consumed and turn that into glucose to stabilize blood sugar or fuel your workout. So taking on that protein would be the substitute. Your consumed protein that's in your stomach will be the substitute for breaking down the lean mass and the aminos from the muscles, skin, and bone. So that's a real simple alternative. If you ever followed a higher protein diet, you know that eating protein in the morning is not going to cause fat gain, is it? No. Now, when you start doing this, if you've been intermittent fasting, you might notice that I don't really feel like eating anything in the morning anymore. My stomach's not really used to it and protein feels heavy. Yeah, I understand that. I went through the same thing. You'll get used to it. Now, if you need to take some digestive enzymes with it to help you digest it, but the thing is you just have to start. And over time, your stomach acid will build back up and get used to breaking breaking down that protein in the morning again. So you will get used to it. If you have to start small over a couple of weeks, but it shouldn't take more than 2 or at most 3 weeks to get your protein intake up to about 30 grams in the morning with breakfast, and you'll get used to it. And then your body will start to expect it, and you'll actually feel a little bit hungry for it. But even if you don't feel the hunger, understand the need. The need is to lower stress hormones. We all need to lower stress hormones. Nobody needs higher cortisol levels or higher epinephrine, and no one needs higher glucagon either, because that increases, again, blood sugar and breaks down lean mass. We don't want lean mass. We don't want less lean mass. If we're trying to lose fat, the last thing we want to do is lose lean mass with it. So you might lose some fat while you're intermittent fasting, but if you're losing lean mass along with it, that's going to have a negative impact on your overall body composition, as well as elevated cortisol, which I found disturbed my sleep. So the alternative, as I mentioned, protein for breakfast. If you do eat carbs or you need carbs before a workout, great, whole food carbs. Minimum, say before a workout, 15, 20 grams, just to give you a little something to burn, give you some glucose to burn instead of breaking down the protein. Because many of you probably want the protein to help you recover from the workout and to rebuild muscle. So a simple protein breakfast of 30 grams of protein, that's enough to stimulate muscle protein synthesis, even in an old 40-year-old. So that stimulate that muscle protein synthesis means that you have enough protein on board to tell your body, hey, we got enough food, we got enough protein, let's go fix some stuff. Let's go stimulate the process of creating muscle protein and shore up some lean mass because we got all this protein on board. So you've resolved the problem, cortisol, and you'll notice if you start eating, it might take 60 days or so, but as you start eating a breakfast, your sleep will actually improve. If you're tracking your sleep with an Oura Ring or a Whoop strap, I personally found that my sleep improved and I had more energy for better performance during my workouts. Better performance during your workouts means you're going to engage more muscle tissue, you're going to get stronger, you're going to build more muscle. Believe it or not, those muscle cells, they'll perform on the basis of the fuel that is available. So if you're underfueled, you don't have enough fuel available when you go into that workout, there's just some muscle cells that are not going to fire. And if they're not going to fire, that means you won't have them to use for strength, to push it. And that means they're not going to grow. So by going into that workout fasted, you are limiting the growth of those muscles as well as the performance of those muscle fibers. So eating breakfast, especially before a workout, is a win-win. If you do need to, now I understand I've got clients too that they work out first thing in the morning, working at 5:36. Again, take in maybe some BCAAs, branched chain amino acids, or some essential amino acids, or a light protein shake, maybe a small piece of fruit that will allow you to digest that quickly. But you went from 15 to 30 grams if you want to keep it small. Give yourself 15, 20 minutes to digest that and then go into your workout. If you do have to do it fasted because of your schedule, make sure you eat a good meal with plenty of protein and whatever. If you're eating carbs, have carbs along with that, whole food carbs, single ingredient carbs, along with that shortly after the workout. Like within half an hour, 45 minutes of the workout, make sure you're eating some breakfast. Okay, and then go on about your day. Eating a protein for breakfast will not inhibit your fat loss. If anything, it's going to help you hang on to muscle, have more energy with less stress hormone, and that's going to allow you to be more satiated. As you get to lunch, you're not going to be reaching for all those things. When you get to work, all those things in the lunchroom, or people have left out, the random donuts that's left behind, or somebody did a big haul from fast food window, right, from the drive-thru and brought it to work to share, you'll feel much more satiated and have much more willpower just to say no to all that garbage food that you know you don't need to eat. And then when you get to lunch, you're not starving to death. You have the wherewithal to make good decisions about what you're going to eat next. Protein intake, especially as we get past 40, is vital for maintaining lean mass as well as satiety. With protein recommendations that I make, which is about 80 to 100% of your lean mass in protein, or 80 to 100% of your goal weight in grams of protein. So if your goal weight is, say, 180 pounds for guys, then your ideal protein intake is going to be somewhere between, let's say, 140 grams of protein per day. Ladies, if your goal weight is 110 or 120, then your ideal protein intake is going to be somewhere between 95, 100 to 120 grams of protein per day. If you're intermittent fasting, which means you're skipping breakfast, and you have time in that 6 or 8 hours to get in maybe 2 meals or possibly 2 meals and a snack, it's going to be very hard to get that entire protein recommendation in your system in 2 meals or even 2 meals and a snack. It's possible, but you may not be as successful at doing that on a regular basis. Very often it's going to be very easy to undereat. Guys, I weigh 210. For me to try to get in 200 or so grams of protein in 2 meals, for me, that's not very comfortable. I don't enjoy that. And I like to eat whole food protein primarily. Protein shakes can be a backup for you, but I recommend whole food protein. You certainly don't want to be taking in half or more of your protein from processed protein. You're missing out on all of the vital micronutrients and all the other nutrients in that food matrix of animal protein and in all the fats of that animal meat that are beneficial to our body. So by squeezing that intermittent fasting window into 6 or 8 hours, you're more likely to miss out on not only the protein, but all of the nutrients we need, all the micronutrients we get from animal protein. So that third meal, crucial. Remember, 30 grams is not a maximum, it's a minimum. So for those of you who are looking for autophagy, hey, I get it. Really, you're not getting a lot of autophagy in a 16 or 18 hour or even a 24-hour fasting window. Autophagy really doesn't kick into gear effectively until about 36 hours. So if you want to get the benefits, the autophagy benefits from intermittent fasting, the best thing you can do is to do a 3 to 5 day fast once or twice a year. Yeah, once or twice a year. That's it. You'll get the autophagy. You'll get the little clean out, the sweep out of the damaged or dead cellular tissue that you want to get rid of. 3 to 5 day fast, very effective for autophagy. You only have to suffer through it once or twice a year, and then you're done. You go back to eating 3 meals a day. Personally, I have clients who were doing intermittent fasting for the reasons they thought, oh, I'll get the autophagy, I'll get the weight loss. I put them on 3 meals a day with that protein breakfast. Out of that protein breakfast, they had been stuck. They started losing weight immediately and feeling better, more energetic, and then added workouts. If your goal is to lose weight, you better be working out. If you're not, I question your motivation, honestly. I question your motivation to really lose weight. But if you're eating the protein and you're eating the protein breakfast and you're doing some strength training and a little bit of extra cardio and there's some activity, that's a great plan for fat loss and hanging on to and building lean mass, which we all need to do, especially over 40. And if you're serious about losing fat, exercise is vital and the protein is vital. So the 3 meals a day is actually much more beneficial for both of those. Again, the autophagy, simple, 3 to 5 days, water, black coffee, or black tea, nothing added. Green tea's fine, but nothing added. So just stick to those fluids along with, if you need it, some salt. If your electrolytes are getting low, you start feeling a little lightheaded, groggy, maybe a headache, add some salt, possibly some magnesium, which would also help with your sleep during that fasted period. Whatever medications you have to take, of course, stick with those medications. Check with your doctor on that as well. But you can do a 3 to 5 day fast very safely and very effectively, and only has to be done once or twice a year. You might get some weight loss, which could bounce back, but more importantly, you'll get the autophagy. You get the cellular clean out, and then you're done. And you can go back to building muscle and losing fat on your plan with the 3 meals a day, the strength training, and the cardio without all of the issues with the elevated stress hormones on a daily or weekly basis. So you get the benefits without all the risks throughout the year. Now, when you do that 3 to 5 day fast, I do not recommend any type of intense exercise, not intense cardio or strength training. Ideal would just be walking or hiking. Do something at zone 1, low level, mild movement, just to get some blood moving, get you feeling better. Maybe at most short duration zone 2, but really that's not necessary. The stress of the fasting period, the 3 to 5 day fasting, it's enough elevation of cortisol. It's enough for that period. You don't need to add more stress to that. Just move through that knowing your body is doing a different function. It's now breaking down and getting rid of damaged or unnecessary cellular tissue. That's great for 3 to 5 days. And then you can go back to your usual 3 meals a day, working out, knowing that's building muscle, burning fat, but without elevating those cortisol levels unnecessarily every single day. Just get it all done at once. It's time to break that fast. Don't make it too complicated. I do recommend eating maybe a small amount of protein for that first meal. So when you break it, just try a small amount, like 4 to maybe 6 ounces of some protein, and then wait. And then you might have a more full meal, a more diverse meal, or a bigger meal a couple hours later. But that way you're not so tempted to just start eating everything, which can come after a fast. Just have that meal prepared and thought out ahead of time. 4 to 6 ounces of animal protein, stop, wait a couple hours, let that settle in, and then go back to your normal eating. And I think you'll find that when you return to a full meal, you won't be so ravenous because you had that little protein early meal, like that pregame with a protein as you're breaking the fast. If you want to hear more about how to build muscle after 40 and the foods that are driving metabolic disease, check out my presentation, Building Muscle After 40, from the Hack Your Health event in Austin, Texas, 2024.